So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to diagnose and repair a ceiling fan light that as soon as you turn the light on, it flickers and then goes off, or it might just not work at all. But you do know you have power to the ceiling fan itself because the fan aspect of it is working just fine. So I'm going to be showing you how to check voltage to make sure you do have power going to the lights, how to diagnose and replace the switch if necessary if that goes bad, and in my case I had a bad wattage limiter. Now a wattage limiter is actually put in ceiling fans to keep you from using more than 190 watts worth of light bulbs in your ceiling fan to conserve energy and possibly keeping your ceiling fan wiring from overheating. It's a great theory. The problem is, in a lot of cases, this wattage limiter is going to cause your lights to flicker and then go out, or just not work at all. And quite honestly, with running LED lights these days, for the most part, you're never going to reach that 190 watts anyways. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to bypass this wattage limiter if you choose to, or go ahead and replace it if you do want it back in there. So I'm going to be showing you this process on two different styles of ceiling fan lights, and even if yours doesn't look exactly like these, the components are pretty much the same throughout most ceiling fans, so this video should help you out. So being as though this video is dealing with electricity, I felt I had to be very thorough in my explanation. So this is a pretty long video, guys. So here is a chapter index of what I talk about and at what times it takes place. So if you don't need to watch the whole video, you can bypass what you don't need to see so I don't waste your time. And let's get to it. So I drew up this wiring diagram because I'm going to show you the components and how to test some things on this, because it's going to be a lot easier to explain on this than on the actual ceiling fans themselves. However, once I'm done explaining it on this, I am going to show you on the ceiling fans themselves so you can see that as well. So right here, we've got a basic ceiling fan that does not have a wattage limiter. So to operate the ceiling fan lights, you're going to have two wires. One's going to be the common or neutral wire. That's going to be a white wire. I did use a green marker for the white wire just because a white marker on a whiteboard doesn't work too well. And then most likely it's going to be a black wire, and that's going to be your hot wire of 120 volts. The white wire is going to come down, go through either a quick disconnect or possibly a wire nut here, and then go to another wire nut, and that's going to split off, and it's going to make contact with the threaded housing on your light socket. So it's going to make contact with this outer shell here. And on your light bulb, that common or neutral is making contact right here on your light bulbs. Then you're going to have a blue or a black wire, and that's going to be your hot lead of 120 volts AC, and that's going to come directly down from the ceiling fan through a quick disconnect or possibly a wire nut here, come down through your light switch, out of your light switch into another wire nut, and that wire is going to split off to the center pole on each one of your light sockets. And that 120 volts makes contact with this point right here on your light bulbs. Now, obviously, your 120 volts stops right here until you pull the switch, and then that 120 volts goes through, which allows the lights to come on. So now I'm going to go through some basic checks you can do with a multimeter. I got this one off of Amazon for like 10 bucks. You can also get them at Harbor Freight. The only thing you need to be able to do is test volts AC and continuity or ohms, and any basic multimeter will do those two things. Now, in order to do these checks, you will have to remove the light fixture from the actual ceiling fan. I recommend pulling the light bulbs out and removing the light covers. Makes the fixture a lot lighter and easier to handle when you're going through this. It isn't absolutely necessary, but especially when we do the tests with the wattage limiter, it makes it much easier to do those tests. There's going to be 3 screws or bolts that are going to hold this light fixture to the ceiling fan. Make sure you shut your light switch off that is powering the ceiling fan and the ceiling fan lights when you do this. Once you remove those 3 screws or bolts, this fixture is just going to come straight down, and you're going to have 2 quick disconnects most likely, and you just unplug those, and then you should be able to pull this light fixture down and off to the side. Now, whether you have one light switch that controls the fan and the lights, or individual switches that controls the fan and the lights separately, either way, you need to turn the light switch on that powers the ceiling fan lights, and we're going to put our multimeter to volts AC, and we're going to test our voltage right here at the hot and the common that we're going down to the lights. So we're going to put our meter there, and we should get anywhere between 110 and 120 volts AC to those two leads. Now, because it's alternating current, it doesn't matter whether you do the leads this way or this way, you are going to get the same reading either way. So if you don't have that 120 volts at this point right here, and you only have one switch that controls the fan and the lights in your house, and the fan was working properly, the only really point of failure could be up above the ceiling fan, where the power from the ceiling comes down and splits off to the ceiling fan and the light fixture. For whatever reason, that connection must have gone bad. However, if you do have a separate light switch that powers the lights and the fan individually, and you don't have power here, then you could have a bad light switch or possibly a bad breaker. Not likely, because they're probably going to be ran off the same breaker, but you might have a problem in the house wiring itself. Or once again, you could have a bad connection right at this point right here. Most likely, if you've got one switch that's operating the fan and the lights, you are probably going to have that 120 volts at this point. Now, since we have the light fixture removed, I'm going to show you how to check the switch, which is pretty much your only other point of failure when you do not have a wattage limiter. And we're going to put the multimeter on ohms. And what you're going to do is take one of your leads and go to this point here, and then take your other lead and go into this wire nut here, and you're going to pull the switch. And when you pull that switch, you should see your meter go from open to closed circuit. So real quick, with just the meter, I'm going to show you how to do that test. We're going to flip this over to ohms. You'll notice we've got OL on the screen there, and that's because we have not made contact. You'll notice when I touch these together, we're going to go to 0. And then when I open them back up, it's going to go back to OL. So basically that's either an open circuit or a closed circuit. And that's exactly what you're checking when you do this. You're seeing if this is making contact through the switch. So as you pull on that switch, you should go from open to closed, open to closed. If you remain open or OL or OFL, that means your switch has gone bad, and that is the problem. So now I've got this drawn up with a ceiling fan that has a wattage limiter in it for the lights. The whole point of the wattage limiter was to limit the amount of wattage that could run through the lights, so you wouldn't basically put 400 watt bulbs on your ceiling fan and overheat the wiring, and it's also basically to conserve energy. However, what happens a lot of the times with these wattage limiters is they start getting a little on the weak side. So when you turn the light switch on for your lights, the bulbs will flicker for a second and then shut down because the wattage limiter cuts the power to it, or the lights will quit working completely. Now, in order to do these checks, it is going to be a little different. We still need to remove this light fixture. However, we need to put the light bulbs back in the sockets. And the reason for that is we have to put a load on this light fixture in order to see if this wattage limiter has gone bad. So we're going to remove the light fixture and leave it hanging from these two wires. Now, if you remove the light covers and put the light bulbs back in, this isn't that heavy, and these two wire connections should hold that light fixture without a problem. If you're not comfortable with that, you can always run a piece of tie wire through one of the screw holes and run it up to one of the screw holes in the ceiling fan and hold it that way. So in order to do this test, we do have to turn the light that powers the ceiling fan lighting on, and that means there will be electricity running through the wiring during this test. So it is a good idea to wear leather gloves, even though I am not, so you don't possibly get shocked. Now we want to put our multimeter on volts AC again, and we're basically going to check and see if this wattage limiter has gone bad. So we need to put the one lead in our common, and we need to find places of contact, whether you have a wire nut here. Once again, just like with the basic ceiling fan, we most likely are going to have 115 volts coming out of this wire here. And then we need to find a place on the other side of the wattage limiter to check it. You might have to poke the wire. If this is a wire nut, you can stick it up in here. And we need to see whether the voltage dropped after the wattage limiter. Another thing you could do to try and diagnose a ceiling fan light fixture that has a wattage limiter is, before you disassemble any of this, take your light bulbs out one by one and leave the power to the lights on. Make sure this switch is in the on position. And as you remove those light bulbs, see if once you get down to either 1 or 2 light bulbs, they start working. That's going to be a sign of a bad wattage limiter as well, because once you load that wattage limiter too much, it shuts down the power. So on one of the ceiling fans that I'm going to show you in this video, I actually had this issue. I had taken the light fixture down and I had tested my voltage at this point with these disconnected, and I had my 120 volts. So I was really confused on what was going on, not realizing that I didn't have a load on it, and that's why I was getting that 120 volts. As soon as I put the light fixture and plugged it back in, the lights wouldn't work because it was dropping the power. So now, let's say we have our 115 volts here, we have our 115 volts here. Another way you can check this switch with this all hooked up with the light switch on is leave that connection point in that common, and then we know we have power before the switch. Then you can go up here and go into this wire nut after the switch and see if you get power here. If you have it here but don't have it here, then your light switch is bad. Now, since I've got this wiring diagram, I'm going to explain how to bypass this wattage limiter if you want to get rid of it. I actually replaced it on one of these ceiling fans in this video, but if I had known the information that I have now, I would have just bypassed it. To bypass it, all you have to do is disconnect your 120 volt hot leg right here. Cut the white wire going into this wire nut here, and then cut your connection point or wire nut right there, and eliminate this wattage limiter. Then just come down here and connect this wire directly to that connection point. And that's all there is to bypassing that wattage limiter. You do want to make sure you tape up that common wire that you cut out of that wire nut so you don't have a possibility of anything shorting out to that. Now I'm going to very quickly run through the footage and explanation on the ceiling fans themselves. So on this ceiling fan, the fan operation and the lights are all operated from one switch in the house. So therefore I know, because the fan is turning, that I do have power going to this ceiling fan for the lights. Now there is that possibility, if you do have a separate switch working the lights, that you could have a bad switch or something, but it's not really likely. So right here I was just removing a couple bulbs and replacing it with a bulb I knew was good out of another ceiling fan in the house, just to verify that I didn't have a bunch of bad bulbs. So once verifying that, I did shut the light switch off so there's no more power to the fan, and I removed the light covers. To remove the light covers, there should be a nut you should be able to grab by hand up around the light socket. And then if they are a little on the tight side, if you turn the light cover itself at the same time you try and loosen that nut, it should help break it free. So this step isn't absolutely necessary. I had 2 reasons for removing these. One is it makes it a lot lighter to remove the cover that I'm about to take down, and the other is so I can show you guys a little better video quality while we're going through this process. So right here I'm just using my multimeter to check for power one more time before disassembling any more of this light fixture. And that's just for safety reasons. Once verifying that I didn't have power going to the light bulb sockets, I went ahead and pulled the 3 bolts that held that ceiling light fixture to the ceiling fan itself, and went ahead and pulled that down. Now you'll notice that with the light covers off, that those 2 wire connections are going to hold that fixture without a problem. Then I just gave those 2 wire connections that were quick disconnect a little tug and removed the light fixture assembly. After removing that, we're going to turn the light switch on that powers the ceiling fan. I actually should have taken the ceiling fan switch and taken it completely off, so there was no chance of me smacking my head on the fan while I was doing this test. So I've got my voltmeter here and I've got it set to AC volts, and I'm putting my leads, 1 in each of those wires, the white and the black, that were going to that ceiling fan light assembly. And you can see I'm actually reading 118 volts. So at this point I was wondering why those ceiling fan lights weren't working. However, I didn't realize at that time that that wattage limiter that I ended up replacing would be showing me that voltage if it was bad. Once I put the light assembly back up there and hooked it up, then that voltage would drop and the lights would not work. So when I was actually doing this diagnostic, I didn't realize what that wattage limiter was, so I was using a process of elimination by switching that ceiling light assembly with another one that I knew to be good in the house. When that light assembly still did not work in the other fan, then I knew I had to go further up, and that's when I tried the wattage limiter, and I took that one out of the fan that was working and put it in the other one, and that's when I realized that was my problem. I ended up getting one off of Amazon for $9, and right here I was just cutting the quick disconnect off of the bad one and using butt connectors to attach it to the new one that I got. The only difference between the old one and the new one I got off of Amazon, instead of a black wire, it had a blue wire. But once again, I just matched my colors, red to red, white to white, and then black instead of blue. So when this happened, I wasn't really sure what a wattage limiter does or why it was there. Knowing what I know now, if it was my house, I would have just bypassed it. However, this was at my sister's house, so it's probably better that I put it back to the way it was anyways. Now you could use wire nuts to do this as well. However, I prefer a crimp fitting whenever it's a soft braided wire because I just feel like it gives me a better connection. I got as many of the butt connectors put on the new wattage limiter as I could before going up and putting it in the ceiling fan because obviously it was easier to do them down on the table than up in the air. Another thing I like to do when it's stranded wire is after stripping off the insulation, I like to twist the ends of the wire because it gives that wire more strength and will handle a crimp connection better. After getting that wattage limiter crimped in place, I went ahead and put the ceiling light fixture back up on the fan and put a couple lights in it and turned it on and made sure it was good. The only thing you need to watch out for when putting that light fixture back up into place on the fan is there is a slot that's cut out in the light fixture to fit around the switch that operates the fan speeds. So just make sure that that cutout area in the light fixture is lined up with your switch for your fan speeds. So this is the other main style of ceiling fan light that you can get, and I will never purchase another one of these because changing out light bulbs is a complete pain in the ass. I removed the keychains for the light and the fan, then removed the decorative nut, then removed the other nut that holds the light cover in place, then removed the 3 screws or bolts that are holding the light fixture to the actual ceiling fan assembly, and lowered the light fixture assembly down. Now right here you can get a good view of those quick disconnects that are commonly on ceiling fans, and all you have to do is pull with a little bit of tension and they will come right apart. Then there was 3 more screws that held this light cover to the rest of this light fixture, so I removed those to access the switch and the rest of the wiring. So right here I'm able to show you a really good view of how you can test the switch with your multimeter using ohms or continuity. So right here you can see I'm putting my one lead in the black wire that was coming from the ceiling fan where we disconnected it, and I'm putting the other lead in the wire nut that was after the switch that splits off to all 3 of the lights. You'll notice on my meter that it has 0 on it right now. That's meaning the switch is in the on position. However, when I pull the keychain on the switch, it goes to OL, meaning an open. Then back to on, 0, back to open, OL. And that's how you can tell if your switch is bad. If it would remain OL during that process, then it's not making contact and you have a bad switch. I did do a quick search on Amazon, and these ceiling fan light switches are very cheap. So looking at this globe light switch, it looks like it has super long threads, but that's actually just an adapter and a double nut. So it does take a regular ceiling fan switch. So if I had had to replace this switch, what I would have done is cut the 2 black wires above the switch, then loosen the switch off of that gold nut, get the new switch, thread the new switch into that gold nut, and then reconnect my 2 black wires with butt connectors. It does not matter which wire is going to what, because all it is an on-off contact, so the direction of the wires does not matter. And that's all there is to replacing the switch if necessary on your ceiling fan light fixture. So on this ceiling fan, I actually got a really good view of the wiring up in the fan, so I'm going to show you even though this does not have a wattage limiter, where it would be and how it would be wired in and how you would bypass it. All right, guys, so here's our ceiling fan wiring. So here is our two wires that were going down to the ceiling fan lights, common and a 120 line. Now, if this did have a wattage limiter in it, how this would work is this blue wire would be going to the red wire on the wattage limiter, and then this black wire out of the wattage limiter would be going down to the ceiling fan lights. This extra white wire is just another common and would be tied into the same connection as all these other white wires right here. So this fan has exactly what you would have if you were to bypass the wattage limiter, because it doesn't have one. So in order to do that, all you would do is cut the white wire off the wattage limiter and make sure you cap that wire in the ceiling fan, and then cut the red wire off of the blue wire coming out of the ceiling fan, and then remove that wattage limiter and put the quick disconnect that was on the black wire from the wattage limiter on that blue wire coming down from the ceiling fan. And that's all there is to it, guys. I'm just reassembling this light fixture to this ceiling fan. Make sure you push these quick disconnects back together nice and tight, and line up the slot in that light fixture to the fan switch and just put your screws back in. I do like to use my regular drill to tighten these down because I can set my torque setting nice and low so I don't strip out those tiny bolts. Then just line up your chains with the light globe, put the nut and rubber washer back on that, and then put your decorative cover back on that and put your keychains back together. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. My channel's loaded with all kinds of different DIYs, all with the same intention: give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.